Hi, welcome to Edward Box Guitar Tuition. Hope you all had a good Christmas and are suitably fed and watered. So, as a little compendium to the classic album inspection that recently finished with the review of Night of the Opera by Queen, I thought I would just quickly skate through all the albums I didn't review that I'd bought and listened to back in the day, back in my teens and early 20s, and quick reasons for that, really. So, just referring to my notes here, AC/DC, I didn't review High Voltage or Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. And those are both albums I had when we were very young, me and my brothers. Real reason for this was I just wasn't quite as into those albums as the other ones. The DC ones didn't seem to do that well in the reviews. Power Age was the one I always loved, but I got into that later. But I do like Dirty Deeds, I do like High Voltage, and the High Voltage we had is effectively TNT plus one track off this Australian High Voltage. But they've got great tracks on them. I just elected not to review them, but I heard those albums as far back as when I was 9 years old on cassette. Next up, Narita by Riot. I was considering this. I'd reviewed Far Down Under and Thunder Steel, but upon listening to it, it didn't quite have the sort of draw for me as much as it did back when I was younger. But it was an album around 80, 81, probably 81. My brother had seen the band at the Port Vale Heavy Metal Holocaust Festival. And we had that record, had a remastered CD. It is a good album. It's just Far Down Under's kind of better, really, and that's the one that I reviewed. Next up, we'll just have a quick look at White Line. So, of course, I reviewed Pride. I was a big White Line fan. We had Fight to Survive, Pride, Big Game, and Main Attraction. Why didn't I review Fight to Survive? I quite like it. I think it's an interesting album. I do think it's decent. But I kind of went off White Line a bit, so in the end, I just decided to do Pride. The Big Game album, the follow-up to Pride, had some great solos on it, but was pretty disappointing. It basically scrapes to about a 6 out of 10. And then Main Attraction from 91 got better reviews, but I could just never get away with it after the track Lights and Thunder. It just didn't do anything for me. It was more like a 4 or a 5 out of 10. And that's kind of what I call Class of 91 album, and I'll just jump to a few albums here from 1991 I bought, where you're excited for the album coming out, but you're maybe not seeing the growth. You've maybe moved on and you're listening at the time. So I'm just turning over here, but there was A Little Late Enough by the David Lee Roth, an album I actually maybe thinks better than Skyscraper now. But the problem with this album was it was a bit of a mishmash. He seemed to be going for the Aerosmithy thing. It wasn't quite as heavy, and of course Jason Becker got ill during it and just didn't really cut loose in a way, or was able to cut loose in a way we expected. On the album. For me, the soloing by a couple of tracks just seemed a bit kind of reined in. I recommend have a listen to Jason Becker's Hot for Teacher audition. I think there's a recording of that, and it's pretty wild what he does. So it's kind of a 6 out of 10. I never saw him on the tour. Another one was Welcome to the Ball by Vicious Rumours. Obviously, I reviewed a Vicious Rumours album and added another one in. It didn't do that many numbers, but Welcome to the Ball was a decent follow-up to Vicious Rumours, but it wasn't as good as the Digital Dictator and the self-titled album. It's a 6, 7 out of 10. You can get it on Rock Candy, so I elected not to review that. No More Tears by Ozzy, another album from 91 I bought, and I just never got into it, and I still haven't really. Love the title track. Quite like the soloing on Desire and tracks like that. I never liked Tomorrow I'm Going Home or Hellraiser much. I just always thought it was an overrated album. I much preferred No Rest for the Wicked. I preferred what Zach did on that. And obviously I reviewed that record. So that was another 1991 one where I was like, Then there was For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge by Van Halen or Van Hagar. So this was, in hindsight at the time, I was like, I'm not as fussed about this, but I think it might be the best Van Hagar album. Now, I never reviewed any Van Hagar albums, and 5150 was regularly on my turntable in 86 and beyond, as was OU812. But listening back to them, I just felt like I wanted to do the David Roth ones and not the Van Hagar ones. Quickly, I think 5150's got the best tracks on it, but it's got some real duffers like Get Up and The Inside, one of the worst finishing tracks ever on an album. I never liked Why Can't This Be Love, so it's always been a kind of 7 out of 10 for me, 6 or 7. As was OU812, not particularly any track I dislike on an album, but there's not a lot of tracks I think are great. I think the production lets that down. I love to hear a remix of that album. It's really chorus the guitar sound. It seems to lack a bit of direction, that album, but I always liked it and I like it now, I just don't love it. So For All Awful Camouflage was actually better in hindsight. Pound Cake and Judgment Day were great tracks. And then the side two is actually pretty strong. Dreaming of a Dream, In and Out, Man on a Mission. I like those tracks. Top of the World's a great little catchy track. 316. And Right Now, a decent ballad. I didn't really care for Pleasure Dome in the end, and then there was Run Around and Spanked, which is a bit crap. But the production with Andy Johns was a lot better. The drum sound, I think Edward's guitar tone, he kind of found that balance. And of course, he'd fully switched his Ernie Ball by then. Then you could add into that, I didn't review Balance. And again, my mate got that at the time, and by that point I kind of just wasn't that interested in the Van Hagar thing. To my eternal regret, I had a ticket to see the band with Bon Jovi at Gateshead Stadium. It was £25. I heard that Edward Van Halen had a hip replacement. I thought, well, I don't want to see Edward Van Halen hobbling around the stage. I'll wait. So I sold the ticket, and the Denver Turbo dated off, and I never got to see him, so I regret that totally. Apparently it was a good show. I did listen to it from outside the arena, heard them start with 7th Seal. But going back to Balance, I think the production is really good on that. The mastering cranking loud. There is some really good songs like 7th Seal, Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do, Aftershock, Feelings, Take Me Back. I think it's let down by a couple of those stupid short instrumentals. I do like Balachirum. I think Amsterdam's got great riffing, but the lyrics are terrible. You got Big Fat Money, but it's an album I like more now. It might be my second favourite Van Hagar album after For All Awful Camouflage, or maybe equal with 5150, which, like I said, is inconsistent, but it still has maybe the best track, each year. Now Hear This by How To. I bought this in 1991. I really love the High Gear album. Again, it just wasn't as good a follow-up. It was kind of not very memorable. The production was poor. 6 out of 10. I wasn't fussed. And yeah, the only other album I can think of, I did get Prisons in Paradise by Europe at this time, but of course I ended up reviewing that in my random review because that's an album I went back to and decided I really liked. But Crazy World by the Scorpions was another one. I bought it in 1990 tail end, but it was kind of going into 91. Really couldn't get into it, and since then I've never really got a grips with it. I really like the track Don't Believe Her, and I think that's excellent. And other tracks, Wind of Change and Send Me an Angel are good. The rocker tracks, I don't mind any of them in particular, but I just don't think they're great. I just think the whole party metal thing had gone too far on that album, but it did very well for them because of Wind of Change. So that's the kind of little class of very late 1991. So going back to my list, Night Range, I reviewed 3 albums by them. I elected not to do Big Life or Man in Motion. Again, they're not the sort of band that gets a lot of reviews, but I didn't love either of those albums. But they're decent. I'd give Big Life these days probably a 7 out of 10, 6.5. Man in Motion, which I actually liked a lot at the time, is probably a 6, but it does have great guitar work by Brad Gillis and Jeff Watson on that album. Some of their best solos, just the 8-finger tapping stuff. He's in full flight on that album. Jeff tears it up, and Brad just equals him. So worth checking out. Gary Moore, Victims of the Future. So this is an album where I love the guitar solos. I think there's an inconsistency really with this. Half the tracks are good shapes of things. Victims of the Future, Murder in the Skies, Hold On to Love, Empty Rooms. Amazing guitar solos on that, but the other tracks are crap. I reviewed Run for Cover because it's a better record, but I fucking love the guitar solos on that album. Cycle of the Moon by Prophet. So Prophet, a quite obscure AOR pop rock band. They did a self-titled debut. This album came out in 88. It's one of my what I call paper round albums. I bought it. Quite liked it. I've always quite liked it. It was just a bit second string. The singer was good but not great. He wasn't like Jimmy Jamerson or Steve Perry. The band are a bit ugly. Some good songs. Some great guitarist in Ken Dubman on this band. Lovely vibrato. But I elected not to review it because I just didn't feel strongly enough about it. Another album from that time I bought, and a lot of people bought this album because I had 3 guitarists. It was Street Ready by Levelwolf. I think this is going back 89. You'll remember, some of you might remember the song Hideaway on Raw Power in this country. Going back to this album, my friend's into them and I've got a copy of it. I actually think it's pretty decent. The guitars by Kerry Howe and Jeff Gayer are really good. It's just lacking great songs, but they've had some at Level Wolf, and they've done other albums. So Street Ready by Level Wolf, certainly worth checking it out. Another album that I came in a bit the worse for wear one night, Raw Power was on, and I had Souls of Black by Testament on. Now I've never bought many thrash albums, and this is one of them I bought. Not the best Testament album, but I bought on the strength of the superb solo on Souls of Black. If you never heard Alex Skonlik's solo on Souls of Black, it's beautifully structured. So that album really stood on that track, really, and a couple of the solos. So I wasn't that fussed with that. If you're interested in Testament, it's worth checking out the Ritual album now after that, because that has some great guitar solos on it by Alex Skonlik. Okay, next, Sahara by House of Lords. So House of Lords were a band I saw support the Scorpions. My brother had the first album with Lanny Cordola on guitar, which I could never get away with. But then on Sahara, they bought it out and had a different guitarist on the back. But when I heard the album, I thought I recognised that guitar player, and it was Doug Aldrich, and there he was in the credits. The Sahara album benefits from that much better guitar work. It's a bit heavier. James Christian's an excellent singer, so this is a pretty good record. And Doug, I forget, is a power ballad somewhere in the middle of the album where he pulls off a beautiful solo. At this time, Doug Aldrich was very much, he was in House of Lords, but he went to Hurricane after Lion finished, and his band was Rise. He was going from one thing to another until he kind of settled into the D.O. Whitesnake thing. But this isn't his best playing, but he's got some very good solos. Then Judas Priest. Obviously reviewed a lot of Judas Priest, my favourite band of all time, but I just didn't want to review Jugulator or Demolition. They're albums I don't like, and usually I prefer Demolition to Jugulator. Again, I've tried sort of getting into them, but the Jugulator album, when it came out, I was like, there's just no melody here, it's too heavy. I still stand by that. It's got terrible lyrics. Demolition's a bit more varied, a little bit more melody, but again, just pretty poor. So Halford came back, and the rest is history. Number one's What's Next by Frank Marino. I've done the Power of Rock and Roll in a random review I do on my other Botbrack channel. I did Juggernaut. So I was going to review this. Maybe I'll make a review in the Classic Albums number 8, 1980, when I get around to that in several years' time. But again, I just decided not to review this. It's a good record. It's just not as good as those other two. But if you want to check out Frank Marino, or you haven't checked it out, listen to it. It's got a track called You've Got Living on it, which is one of his very best songs. Then a class of, this is 89, sorry, Point Blank by Bonfire. So I reviewed Fireworks. That was an album I bought because I like the album cover in Ear Records in Lancaster. Point Blank I got later in a Shock of Windows, which is now shut sadly in Newcastle. This is a decent record, and it's got really good guitar solos on it by a guy called Angel Schleifer, who they got in. Problem was, it had 15 tracks on it, just too many songs. And although the songs were of decent quality, it just lacked kind of standout cuts that the Bob Fireworks album had. Then there was Heart. There's several albums I couldn't review by them. Brigade, Bad Animals, Desire Walks On. I'd all had I got them when they came out. I'd also checked out Beverly Strange and Passion Works. Passion Works is quite interesting, more of an AOR album. Mine, Popoff's favourite Heart album. So these are all ones I consider reviewing, but again, the Heart ones didn't do that well, but I just wanted to kind of stick to those classic ones and the Heart album, because that was the one that really hit the spot with me. But actually, Brigade's a very good record, 8 out of 10. Bad Animals, it's a bit light AOR, but it has got good tracks. And Desire Walks On's an excellent album from 93. Just kind of came and went, but a little heavier, really, really good. Beverly Strange, yeah, kind of a bit more punky new wave influence on that. And Passion Works, like I said, some really good AOR on that. So they're all worth listening to. Lion, Trouble in Angel City. So of course I reviewed Dangerous Attraction by Lion, one of my favourite kind of hair glam metal albums, although they don't actually look that glammy on it. So this is the follow-up. They lost their deal with Scotty Brothers. The budget wasn't as big. It's on Grand Slam Records, but it's pretty decent. It's a good follow-up. It's not as good. Lots of good tracks on it. A really cool cover of Lock Up Your Daughters by Slade. The main thing on this for me is Doug Aldrich Place Up a Storm. He had more chops by this time, and it contains some of his best guitar solos. If you've not heard any early Doug Aldrich on Bad Moon Rising or Line, Hurricane and so on. Check it out. He actually kind of, he kind of had more chops in a way than he does on something like Dead Daisies. So again, I still remember buying that record. I bought it the same day I got the Mr. Big David Arm, which I reviewed. And I really liked it, but I just decided, Lion were quite a cult act, so it's better to push the Dangerous Attraction. From 92, Realised Fantasies by TNT. So of course TNT did two absolutely classic albums in Tell No Tales and Intuition. This was the 92 album. Obviously grunge has come along. It's not as glammy. I think the main problem with this album is the songs are good, but they're too long. And the production's not as polished. And then Ronnie Lithecroft's solos, it's like he's starting to run out of ideas. He does a nice kind of symphonic bit in the track Lionheart, but it's just not as good. And it's an album that's indicative of what happened in the 90s. Bands had kind of done their 80s things, and the way to navigate the 90s to me was to expect to sell less records, try and keep your fan base happy and do something heavier, but keep the elements within that that kept fans happy. But a lot of bands just didn't know what to do. Okay, next up, a couple of Malmsteen albums, Eclipse and Fire and Ice. Eclipse from 1989, I think. Was it 1990? Sorry, 1990. And Fire and Ice from 92. So Eclipse, I consider reviewing this, but it's a good Malmsteen record. I like it more than I did at the time, but it's not great. I didn't think it added anything to the party from reviewing those first four Malmsteen albums, and of course Alcatraz's No Parole from Rock and Roll. But Fire and Ice was actually a really great comeback for Malmsteen. He was signed to Elektra. He's had another big deal. It's got some really great songs on it. Production's good, and Malmsteen's playing phenomenal on it. He gets his chops back, which he didn't really recover from his car accident he had in '88. If you listen to the Perpetual opening track, it's amazing what he does. But again, I just decided, I'll leave this one. Maybe I could have done it as a random review. But Fire and Ice, I definitely recommend checking it out. You need to check out Eclipse. And Malmsteen, he didn't, up to his orchestral album, he didn't make a bad album. Then we've got a couple of John Sykes based ones. So there's Ties of Pantang, Spellbound. This was an album I had back in the day. This is the best album of the Ties of Pantang. And there's a new Wobham album. It's probably the album that competes the most with Iron Maiden, what Def Leppard were doing on High and Dry, and of course Saxon. John Sykes really lifts the band, and he does some great solos on this track called Blackjack, Gangland, Hellbound, some absolutely rippingly lovely melodic solo on Don't Stop By. It's a decent record, well produced by Chris Tsangarides. In the end, I just decided not to review it. It seemed a bit random. But check it out if you want to check out John Sykes. And then of course Thunder and Lightning by Thin Lizzy. At the time when the Cold Sweat song came out, we had the single. I think it was Bad Habits, A Heart Attack on the B-side, I'm not sure, but the solo on Cold Sweat and the track Cold Sweat, I was just like, this is amazing. In hindsight, I think the album's really good. I think it suffers from some 80s-ness in the production, some sort of 80s drum sounds, and keyboards are starting to creep in. I think John Sykes does some great solos, I particularly love his solo on Holy War. But it's sort of production elements and mix elements, and it's a better album than the two albums before, although Renegade has its fan. But I just feel the Lizzy albums I reviewed, both in random review and in the classic album inspection. Did they do it in random review? Not sure. That's your golden period of Lizzy. Black Rose, working back to fighting. You go from fighting through a Black Rose, you can't really go wrong. And I felt Thunder and Lightning was an afterthought. And finally, the other one was Journey Frontiers. So I had Journey's greatest hits, which led me to buy Escape. Escape's a classic album, as is Frontiers. I think Escape's better, although some people prefer Frontiers. But I reviewed Escape and I just didn't feel necessarily the urge to review Frontiers. But there's about 40 albums there that I could have reviewed, and I just really wanted to get my thoughts on those. So yeah, you might have found that of interest, and you may find some titles in there you might want to, like I say, check out. Okay, remember, share and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks very much.